Good afternoon, Samir sir.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good, sir.
Great to see you after so much time.
Yeah, sir. This took quite long time.
Yes.
हाँ यादविंद्र जी रेडी रहने बस स्टार्ट होगा हाँ है मैम स्टार्ट करिए प्लीज
Okay, sir, I'll start. Good afternoon, everyone. First, on behalf of the Department of Students, I thank all officers for permitting us to have a combined dialogue on a very important topic, cybersecurity. I also extend a warm welcome to my colleagues, external guests, and students. Before we start the lecture, I request all of you to kindly stand up at your respective places for the university anthem. I request Yadvinder, please play the university anthem. Thank you all. Today, the world stands up and takes a note of the Chinese hybrid warfare. But how many in India are actually pondering over these kinds of warfare tactics and its related solutions? Hybrid threat is an umbrella term that encompasses a wide variety of existing adverse circumstances which have been created by the adversary in question. These include terrorism, illegal migration, and deliberate demographic changes, piracy, corruption, ethnic conflict, etc. Cyber attacks are also one of them. These new wars along the lines of asymmetric conflict, they constitute a dichotomous choice between counterinsurgency and conventional war, and thus challenge the traditional concepts of war and peace. India's rapid digitization, especially in government services, is helping to transform its economy. Simultaneously, it is exposed to cyber threats which only increase as the economy grows. So far, there have been no major state-sponsored disruptive cyber attacks. Instead, it has been subjected to thousands of smaller attacks and various data breaches. The government has been proactive in dealing with such threats. It has responded by making cybersecurity a policy priority through various measures. India's cybersecurity push comes in the backdrop of global escalation of cyber rivalries, where nation states are exploiting each other's interdependencies on information, communication, and digital technologies to launch cyber attacks. In this backdrop, the department has invited Mr. Sameer to enlighten us on the challenges of cybersecurity and their source of origin, China and Pakistan, the policy measures taken by the government, and the functioning of different institutional mechanisms to prevent cyber attacks. Mr. Sameer is currently serving as a fellow International Security Studies program in the Gateway House, which is in Mumbai. From September 2008 to April 2013, Mr. Sameer has served as an assistant director in the National Security Council Secretariat, Prime Minister's Office, Government of India, New Delhi. He has been awarded with various fellowships and awards, the prominent ones being the Canberra Fellowship, which has been awarded by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Australia in 2019, Asian Forum for Global Governance Fellowship, which has been given by the Observer Research Foundation, India in 2016, and in 2014, he was an international visitor in its leadership program to visit the US mission to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Brussels. I now request HOD Dr. Baba Singh to please welcome the speaker.
Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Ravindra Prasad Tiwari, distinguished speaker Mr. Sameer Patil, faculty members of the department, dear students and research scholars of the department, and outside participants, sabhi ko namaskar and good afternoon to one and all. The Department of South and Central Asian has been feeling privileged and honored to organize the expert lecture by Mr. Sameer Patil on the topic India's cybersecurity challenges. On this grand occasion, on behalf of Central University of Punjab and faculty members of the Department of South and Central Asian Studies, indeed it is honor and privilege to extend a very warm welcome to everyone on this academic event. First of all, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Ravindra Prasad Tiwari, who has been very kindly accepted not only our invitation, rather motivated and inspired to organize this wonderful event. Very warm welcome, sir. Although he is not at the moment with us, but he is busy with some prior engagements. But anyway, sir is always, always has a lot of motivation and encouragement for the department to organize these kind of events. Department is also very privileged and honored to have Mr. Sameer Patil with us. The simple and important reason to be happy is that ultimately the true expert on cybersecurity like you to be being with us, and your inputs are going to be enrich not only the department faculty members, academic horizon, rather students would get also inspired and motivated to delve into such issues of prime security concerns of the country. Giving us your consent for invited lecture despite having a very busy schedule, and your benign presence is indeed great pleasure and honor for the department. Very warm welcome to you, sir. At the last, I would like to extend warm welcome both the internal and external participants, such as department faculty members, department students, scholars who are connected with us at the moment. I would also like to extend very warm welcome to the external participants being with us on this occasion. So now at last, I would like to request to Mr. Sameer Patil, please share his ideas with the participants. Mr. Sameer, please.
Thank you, Dr. Singh, and thank you, Dr. Kaushiki, for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to the Central University of Punjab faculty and the students. I also want to extend my gratitude to Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Ravindra P. Tiwari for inviting me to speak today. And good afternoon to all the faculty and all the students as well as the external participants who have come to attend this lecture today. So let me just share my screen first. So, before I begin, I want to add one disclaimer. Uh, I'm a security analyst and I don't have any technology background. My intention today to talk about the cybersecurity issues is at the intersection of technology, geopolitics, and national security. Because today, cybersecurity touches and impacts all these domains. Thank you. So let's begin. So some of you may have heard about these two recent reports a few months ago. One coming from a US-based company called as Recorded Future, which revealed that a China-linked hacker group called as Red Eco had targeted the Indian power sector at a time when both the countries were engaged in a border standoff in eastern Ladakh. Subsequently, the company, Recorded Future, also noted that not just the power sector, but also the Indian ports as well as some parts of the Indian railways infrastructure also were targeted by the Chinese hackers. The second report came from a Singapore-based company called as Sai Pharma, which noted that again a Chinese state-backed hackers group had targeted the information technology systems or the IT systems of the two Indian vaccine makers, Bharat Biotech and the Serum Institute, whose COVID vaccines are being used not only in our domestic vaccination program, but they're also a key part of India's vaccine diplomacy, Vaccine Maitri. So what do we understand from these two attacks? One is that a new front is emerging in the India-China security competition, where, frankly speaking, we had seen such kind of attacks in the past also, but this is the first time that we have seen these attacks happening at a time when there was an ongoing border standoff. Secondly, these attacks are also a reflection of the global trend where hackers, supported by the states, are targeting the critical infrastructure of other countries. But before I go into the details of the cybersecurity challenges for India, let me first turn your attention to the basics, which is to look at the definition of cybersecurity. There is one academic definition which comes from the International Telecom Union, which is the specialized agency of the United Nations for Information and Communication Technologies. The ITU says that cybersecurity is the collection of tools, policies, security concepts, security safeguards, guidelines, risk management approaches, actions, training, best practices, assurance, and technologies that can be used to protect the cyber environment and organization and users' assets. Now, these assets include computing devices, staff, telecom systems, etc. There is another practical definition which is given by the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which says that cybersecurity is measures taken to protect a computer or a computer system against unauthorized access or attack. What these two definitions tell us is that basically all of us are part of the cybersecurity environment. Whatever devices that we use, smartphones, iPads, laptops, tablets, computers, the government websites, or the servers, they're all part of the cyber environment. And therefore, the risks to these devices and the steps taken to plug those devices are part of cybersecurity. I want you to remember this dimension of cybersecurity because I will return to it at the end of my lecture. Technology has become the main driver of contemporary international relations, which is defining politics, security, and economics. It is also challenging the Westphalian international system, which is based on the sovereign nation states. And in this also, there is an interesting contrast which is emerging. Many countries in Asia and Africa are still coming to grips with the basic challenges of nationhood, but simultaneously, they are finding it difficult to tackle the technological challenges emanating from the cyberspace. And on the other hand, the European and the North American countries have developed sophisticated capabilities to mitigate the cybersecurity challenges. So the divide between the North and the South which is what we used to hear in international relations, the gap between the developed world and the developing world, has now acquired an additional dimension: the digital divide. If one looks at the figures of internet penetration worldwide from the ITU, what emerges is this. In developed countries, internet penetration is 87% as compared to 47% in developing countries and 19% in the least developed countries. And there is also the digital gender gap. Whereas in developed countries, only 86% of the women have access to internet as compared to the 87% of men. In the least developed countries, the ratio is 14% for women, 1/4, and 24% for men. This digital divide means that more than 3 billion people in the world, which is almost half of the world's population, are still offline. And that in itself becomes an important factor in the geopolitics of cybersecurity. Turning now our attention to the geopolitical rivalries in the cyberspace. As Dr. Kaushiki said, today countries are exploiting each other's dependence on information and communication and digital technologies to breach computer networks, steal sensitive data and proprietary information, and disrupt critical infrastructure operations. What is critical infrastructure? Critical infrastructure is basically telecommunication network, your air traffic control, your signal management, nuclear reactors, power plants, oil pipelines, all that type of infrastructure, which is basically essential to the functioning of a society, nation, and country. These services are required to be available 24/7 and they need to be functional at all times. And therefore, it is no wonder that today all major powers have developed dedicated cyber units which find out weaknesses in these critical infrastructure networks and target them to launch cyber attacks. As a result, cyber attacks targeting national and commercial computer networks have increased in the last few years. However, 2020, the last year, was an exceptional year because it witnessed a significant expansion of the cyber threat. When the world's attention was focused on tackling the global health emergency, the COVID-19 pandemic, many states and non-state actors such as the hacker groups found an opportunity to target other countries' computer networks. This is evident from multiple attacks which targeted critical infrastructure which is required to fight the pandemic, such as hospitals and other healthcare facilities and pharmaceutical companies. The attack on the Indian vaccine makers that I described earlier is one such example, but we have seen such attacks happening in Europe also earlier. While states are mainly responsible for these attacks, there are also non-state actors like the hacking groups and organized cyber criminal syndicates, which are targeting other countries and companies. Many of the times, these non-state actors are proxies of the states, and that has really blurred the distinction between the state actor and non-state actor in the cyberspace. And in carrying out these attacks, the attackers usually take the advantage of the problem of attribution. What is the problem of attribution? Well, because any cyber attack that happens today is usually routed through multiple servers located in different countries, it is difficult to clearly identify who has carried out the attack, and therefore it is difficult to attribute the responsibility. That is the problem of attribution. Of course, in recent years, the United States government and many American cybersecurity companies have made significant progress in identifying people and actors responsible for various cyber attacks and have publicly named them, what is known as naming and shaming tactic. We saw this in the case of the recent Chinese attacks in the Indian power sector, where the Red Echo hacking group, supported by the Chinese state, was identified as an attacker. This is also true in case of some of the major attacks which have happened in the last few years, where the attacker or the perpetrator of the attack was identified. I have selected here 4 of these prominent attacks. In 2009, the Stuxnet virus targeted the Iranian nuclear program. It was allegedly designed by the United States and Israel. When the virus hit the Iranian nuclear reactor at Natanz, it slowed down its operations and thereby affected the speed of uranium power investment. However, the Stuxnet virus also impacted operations at critical infrastructure facilities and manufacturing sites in many other countries. In 2014, there was a data breach in the Sony Corporation's computer networks. It was carried out by a group of hackers who were allegedly supported by the North Korean government. In fact, the attack was reportedly in response to a satirical movie called as The Interview, which was based on the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and which was produced by Sony Pictures. So the hackers got into Sony Corporation's computers, stole sensitive data, including confidential emails, future business plans, and personal details of Sony's employees, and at least one movie which had not yet been released by the Sony Pictures. In 2016, Bangladesh Bank, which is the central bank of Bangladesh, its account at Federal Reserve Bank in New York was breached when the hackers issued instructions to transfer almost $900 million from its account. And in this attempt, transaction worth 100 million was successful. The attack was linked to a North Korean group called as Lazarus. In this particular case, Bangladesh Bank was able to recover only $38 million. And the last of the major attack is a recent one, which you may have heard, when cyber criminals launched a ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline, which carries about 45% of all the fuel consumed on the United States eastern coast. The attack disrupted fuel supplies and caused a rise of price in some parts of the country. In fact, the company paid almost $4 to $5 million in bitcoins as a ransom to restore the operations of the pipeline. So those were some of the select attacks. But there are many other attacks which have happened in the last few years. You can see all sorts of targets: financial institutions, businesses, government departments, all are fair targets in the cyber warfare. In fact, all these attacks have made cyber warfare a hybrid war phenomenon. Hybrid wars are characterized by three things: using non-state actors as proxies, second, aggressive use of information tactics, and third, plausible deniability, which is reflected in the problem of attribution. So this hybrid warfare has dismantled the binary distinction between war and peace and created the gray zones of conflicts. And as a result, major military powers such as the United States, Russia, and China, along with many other countries, have established dedicated cyber units within their militaries. So far, states which have faced cyber attacks have responded by launching retaliatory cyber attacks. So, for instance, after the Stuxnet virus hit the Iranian nuclear program, Iranian government-linked hackers targeted the Saudi oil company called as Aramco and wiped out the data from almost 75% of its computer network. And that caused significant disruption. However, what we have also seen is that as the frequency of cyber attacks has increased, there are some states who are willing to use military retaliation for a cyber attack, at least against the non-state actors, the perpetrators of the attacks. For instance, Israel, which has faced multiple repeated attacks from the Hamas terrorist group, decided to preempt the next cyber attack from the Hamas by bombing the group's technology division based in the Gaza Strip in May 2019. The Israeli action marked for the first time that a military responded to a cyber threat on a real-time basis in a conflict situation. However, that action also sparked a debate on what should states do against irresponsible state and non-state behavior in the cyberspace. Those discussions have been part of the efforts to create a rules-based order in the cyberspace. A milestone in this process was in 2004 when the United Nations set up a group of governmental experts, what is known as UNGGE process. The group recommended the need by the UN member states to expand confidence building measures which can reduce the risk of conflict in the cyberspace. However, this process collapsed in 2017 because of the disagreements between major powers over the applicability of the specific international law for cyberspace. Since then, the global momentum to shape norms for responsible state behavior have got polarized. Right now, there are two parallel tracks which are going on. One is the UNGGE 2019 and 21, which just recently submitted its report, which is basically supported by the United States. And then there is the open-ended working group, which is bringing together all the interested states and is sponsored by Russia. Both processes are happening parallelly. And in a sense, this is also the reflection of the two competing visions for governing the cyberspace. One vision is led by Russia, which emphasizes the role of the states for managing their cyberspace effectively. In contrast, there is this other vision, which is championed by the United States, which underlines the need to protect the cyberspace by involving all the stakeholders, not just the government, but also the academia, civil society, businesses, think tanks, and human rights organizations. And as a result of this polarization, there have been efforts by many technology companies to bring a rules-based order in the cyberspace because they're also getting targeted in this geopolitical rivalry in the cyberspace. Microsoft, which as the owner of the world's most widely used proprietary software, the Windows operating system, has now taken the lead in calling for other stakeholders to work towards a cyber norms regime. In 2017, the company proposed Digital Geneva Convention, which urged the governments and other stakeholders to protect the public from the cyber warfare. So as you can see, there is no dearth of initiatives to bring order to the highly contested cyberspace. However, just like other domains of international politics, power and capabilities matter. And therefore, how many of these initiatives become successful actually depends on just three leading powers in the cyberspace: the United States, Russia, and China. If these states want to protect the cyberspace from any kind of offensive cyber operations, they will make an effort to bring some order. But right now, all these states are benefiting from the cyber warfare, and therefore they are not interested in evolving a rules-based order for the cyberspace. It is in this global context that India has positioned itself as an emerging economy with a sophisticated technology industry. Currently, India is executing an ambitious plan to digitize its economy by using the information and communication technology to deliver citizen-centric government services through the flagship program of Digital India. And then there are several new innovations such as the UPI, the Unified Payments Interface, India Stack, and the Aadhaar-enabled payment systems or the AEPS, which are creating a new framework for digital payments and financial inclusion. India has currently approximately 700 million users, many of them first-generation internet users. That constitutes the second largest internet user base in the world after China. This rapidly expanding internet user base has also brought with it the challenge of increased cyber threats. In the early days, many Indians were victims of social engineering attacks and online advance fee scams, where they were tricked in providing their personal and financial details, also sometimes deposit money, and that caused many cases of economic frauds. And this was particularly evident in the case of the Nigerian phishing emails. I'm sure many of you would have received this type of email, and I'm pretty sure that many of us would not have responded. But that's because we know that these are fake emails. But guess what? Back in those days, in 2012-13, when these emails came, many users did respond, and naturally there were consequences. As per one assessment, in 2013, around 12 billion US dollars were lost to these fraudsters, to these Nigerian email scams, with a total loss of around $82 billion. Why does it matter to India? Because India was one of the top five growing markets for the Nigerian email frauds, and in 2013, Indians lost around $900 million to this fraud. Of course, as I said, now there is a growing awareness among the people that these emails are fake, but the fraudsters have also changed their tactics, and now they are impersonating themselves as representatives of a mobile company or a tech company or income tax department to trick people in giving money to them. Parallel to this is also the emergence of the cyber threats from Pakistan and China. From Pakistan, the major threat in the initial days was the hacking and defacing of the Indian websites, what I call as the nuisance value attacks. But of course, over a period of time, these attacks have evolved to become far more penetrating and advanced. However, as we saw in the beginning of this presentation, it is from China that India faces the most insidious cyber risk. In recent years, attacks from China have become more penetrating and they have targeted multiple Indian computer networks. One of the most significant and sophisticated attack which came from China was known as APT-30, which basically breached several Indian computers looking for information on the India-China border dispute, Indian naval activity in the South China Sea, and India's relations with its South Asian neighbors. This operation ran for a decade and it was only detected in 2015. Apart from Pakistan and China, India has also been at the receiving end of other state-sponsored operations, such as the United States National Security Agency's PRISM surveillance program, as well as the North Korea-backed Lazarus Group, which targeted the Cosmos Bank, which is a Pune-based bank, in 2018. In this attack, the Cosmos Bank lost around 94 crores through ATMs and online transfers. That money was never recovered. One final thing that I want to point out here is that technical evidence may have pointed out the involvement of the state actors such as Pakistan and China in carrying out attacks against India. However, officially the government has not blamed any country for these attacks. Another significant aspect of the cybersecurity canvas is cyber terrorism. Anti-India terrorist groups based in Pakistan, such as Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, have used social media platforms for radicalization, propaganda, and recruitment. With the emergence of the Daesh, which is also known as the Islamic State terrorist group, this challenge amplified because the group focused on mobilizing lone wolves to launch terrorist attacks. In a span of 3 years, between 2014 and 17, the ISIS or the Daesh, through its online propaganda, also successfully lured Indian youth to join the battlefield in Iraq and Syria. And therefore, countering this extremist propaganda in the cyberspace and on social media platforms has emerged as a significant challenge for the Indian security establishment. A related challenge with reference to this is fake news and disinformation campaigns. Particularly on fake news and disinformation, Pakistan and Iran have emerged as serious sources of threat. For example, in August 2019, following India's decision to withdraw the special status of Jammu and Kashmir and bifurcate the state into two union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, Pakistani establishment was seen using social media platforms to propagate a false narrative against India. For this, it utilized fake profiles, cyber trolls, and journalists, besides some Pakistani diplomats, and focused on themes such as the alleged human rights violations in the Kashmir Valley, plight of the ordinary Kashmiris, etc. I talked about the critical infrastructure in the beginning of this lecture, but in case of India, that threat really emerged in 2010 when the Stuxnet virus infected many computer networks in India. It infected the computers running the power grids in Gujarat and Haryana, as well as oil and natural gas corporation offshore oil rig. These infections were minor; nonetheless, they made India the third largest victim of Stuxnet virus after Iran and Indonesia. The fact that it spread rapidly in the Indian computer network also revealed the vulnerabilities of the critical infrastructure and the SCADA systems, the supervisory control and data acquisition systems, which are used to manage operations at these critical infrastructure facilities. And since then, the focus has been on protecting this critical infrastructure and prevent the disruption in their operations. But it has proved to be easier said than done, because many of these systems were installed almost decades ago when internet and did not even exist, and therefore these systems were not designed to resist any cyber attack. In 2014, the government set up the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center (NCIIPC), which works with the public and private sector for plugging the gaps in the critical infrastructure. A major problem in protecting the critical infrastructure is the reluctance among the private sector or the businesses to disclose their problems or vulnerabilities to others because they fear exposing themselves and therefore losing a competitive edge over their business rivals. Moving from critical infrastructure to payment systems. As I said, India has made a rapid transition from a cash economy to a cashless payment system. We already know about this initiative called as JAM, JAM, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana initiative, J, to make basic financial services available to all, linkage of Aadhaar national identity cards to government subsidy payments, that is A, and promotion of mobile banking and other mobile phone based payment systems, therefore N, JAN. Of course, these payment systems comes at a time when the banking and the financial sector is becoming a sustained target of hacking and data breaches all over the world. There have been many incidents in India targeting the financial sector. The most serious one was in 2016 when there was a malware attack on the Hitachi payment systems. In this incident, the servers of the Hitachi payment services were infected through a malware, through virus, and that enabled unauthorized access to the hackers to all the debit card data. That access resulted in the economic loss which totaled 1.3 crore rupees. It also forced major Indian and private sector banks to replace more than 30 lakh ATM come debit cards. Another serious attack was on the Union Bank in 2016 when a malware breached the bank's servers and gained access to its payment systems. This allowed the hackers to siphon off $170 million from the bank's foreign exchange accounts. Fortunately, with timely intervention, the bank fully recovered the stolen money. But as we have seen, some banks are not so fortunate. In the case of the Cosmos Bank attack, which I described earlier, the bank lost 94 crores and never recovered that money. Now, an emerging concern on this cyber threat canvas is that of the digital black markets, which are hosted on the deep web. What is deep web? So, deep web is basically beyond the open traffic of the regular internet. So, all the websites that we frequently visit, Gmail, Yahoo, Wikipedia, Google, everything. If you look at this figure of iceberg, all those websites that we surf regularly are part of the surface web. But just like an iceberg, there is a substantial portion of that iceberg which is below the water, and therefore there is this huge network of deep web which is there, which you cannot access, which is normally not accessible. And a tip of that deep web below water is called as a dark